Our bodies are constantly relying on billions and billions of red blood cells to carry oxygen and keep us going. But what happens when that system just breaks? Well, today we're going to look at two completely different ways these vital cells can come under threat. One's an outside attack, and the other? It's a flaw from within. Let's dive in.
So, I want you to imagine your immune system for a second. It's like this highly trained security force, right? Its whole job is to protect you. But what if it suddenly gets its signals crossed, and instead of fighting off invaders, it turns its weapons on your own people, your own cells? This isn't some sci-fi plot. It's the reality of an autoimmune disorder.
And yeah, that sounds absolutely terrifying, but it's also incredibly rare. I mean, we're talking about a condition that affects only about 1 to 3 people out of every 100,000. That rarity makes it a fascinating and, honestly, a pretty misunderstood medical puzzle.
The official name for this is autoimmune hemolytic anemia, or AIHA for short. Yeah, it's a bit of a mouthful, but the definition is actually pretty straightforward. Your immune system is destroying red blood cells faster than your body can possibly make new ones. Simple as that.
Okay, so let's take a closer look. What really happens when your red blood cells find themselves under, well, friendly fire? What does this internal battle actually look like?
When you're losing red blood cells, your body starts sending out distress signals. You might feel this overwhelming fatigue, this just profound weakness, or feel kind of dizzy. Your heart might start racing, trying to make up for that lack of oxygen. Some people even see physical changes, like their skin getting pale or even yellowish. That's called jaundice, or their urine getting darker.
Now, this is where it gets really interesting. The attack can actually be triggered by temperature. In the most common type, warm AIHA, the antibodies go on the attack at normal body temperature. But in cold AIHA, the whole thing kicks off when your body temperature drops, causing the red blood cells to literally clump together. It's wild. Two totally different triggers for the exact same destructive result.
So the million-dollar question is, why? Why does this happen? Well, for about half of all people with AIHA, it's a complete mystery. Doctors call this idiopathic, which is really just a fancy way of saying, we don't know. For the other half, it's triggered by something else. Another autoimmune disease like lupus, certain cancers, viruses, or even a reaction to a medication.
So to really boil it down, AIHA is a case of mistaken identity. The body's own defense system makes a terrible, terrible error and starts attacking its own healthy cells. It's an external assault, if you will, on the very system it's supposed to be protecting.
And that brings us to our second story. What if the problem isn't an outside attacker at all? What if the red blood cells themselves are built with a fundamental defect? What if they were flawed from the very beginning, just destined to fail?
All right, let's explore this second problem. Here, we're not talking about an external attack anymore. We're talking about a problem that's written right into the genetic code, a flawed blueprint for the cells themselves.
This kind of condition is called an enzymopathy. It's a genetic disorder where a really specific enzyme is either missing or just doesn't work right. And without that enzyme doing its job, essential processes inside the red blood cell just fall apart, causing the cell to basically self-destruct.
So how does something like this happen? Well, think of your genes as the blueprint for making enzymes. A genetic mutation is kind of like a typo in that blueprint. Now, for many of these disorders, you have to inherit a flawed copy from both of your parents. And when that happens, your body just can't produce the correct, functional enzyme that it needs.
And this right here gets to the absolute heart of it. The problem isn't the immune system. It's right there in the DNA. The whole basis for this is a mutation in a gene. And most of these are what scientists call autosomal recessive disorders. Again, that just means you need to get a bad copy of the gene from both mom and dad for the disease to actually show up.
Okay, so we've got a genetic flaw, but how does a tiny little error in the DNA translate into real-world, serious health problems? Let's take a look. Let's look at a few examples to make this real. G6PD deficiency is actually one of the most common human enzyme defects in the entire world. And get this, for people with this condition, something as simple as eating fava beans can trigger a massive destruction of their red blood cells. Other conditions like PK deficiency and P5N deficiency are also major causes of this kind of anemia.
Now, the signs of an enzymopathy can look surprisingly similar to AIH. You know, the anemia, the jaundice, and enlarged spleen. But a huge clue can be the trigger. As you can see here, someone with G6PD deficiency might get symptoms like dark urine only after they've been exposed to a specific drug or food. That's a telltale sign.
So we've got two very different root causes. One's an attack, the other's a flaw. How do doctors figure out what's going on, and more importantly, what to do about it?
Well, the diagnostic path is where these two stories really split. For AIH, doctors are looking for evidence of that immune attack with blood tests. But for an enzymopathy, they're testing for enzyme activity and actually looking at the genes themselves. There's a key test called the Coombs test, and it'll be negative in these cases, which tells doctors there's no immune assault happening. Now, while managing both might involve things like transfusions, for enzymopathies, a huge part of staying healthy is just learning and avoiding those very specific triggers.
So there you have it, two different paths to the same devastating problem, a body at war with itself versus a body built from a faulty blueprint. It really leaves us with a big question to think about, doesn't it? Which one reveals more about the incredible fragility of our own biology, an accidental war or a flawed design?